Like and subscribe to my channel and click the bell icon to get new video updates.
Celebrate bottled in Bond Bourbon, the spirit that saved American whiskey. March 3, 1897, was a pivotal day in the history of bourbon. Up until that point, American whiskey suffered from a complete lack of quality control. There were no standards to ensure that what was labeled straight bourbon actually lived up to the claim. In fact, most didn't, and were often adulterated with all manner of unsavory coloring and flavorings. Iodine, glycerin, even formaldehyde were common culprits. Yummy. Everything changed on that balmy Washington, D.C. Wednesday afternoon, with the passage of the Bottle and Bond Act. The act requires that any liquid bearing a revenue stamp must be aged in a federal bonded warehouse and held for at least 4 years under government oversight. The first ever consumer protection mandated by Congress was championed by a Colonel Edmund Haynes Taylor Jr. That's why the whiskey, which now bears his name, the ideal offering to celebrate National Bottled in Bond Day every third day of March. The core range consists of 3 bottlings: small batch, single barrel and straight rye. The first of the trio is somewhat achievable at under $100. The second 2 not so much. You can attribute these aftermarket prices to the success of Buffalo Trace, which makes the line at its legendary facility in Frankfort, Kentucky. It's the same sacred ground on which they lay Pappy Van Winkle, W.L. Weller, Eagle Rare, to name just a few of their labels that drive whiskey lovers into a frenzy. Releases that command their own stratospheric secondary ratings. But whether you refinding a small batch printout at a suggested retail price of $40 or one from a keg that survived a $15,000 tornado, there's a solid line that connects them all. Of all the unicorns he's brought into the world, you can tell he's particularly proud to be making a whiskey that bears the Taylor name, which wasn't regulated back then, he says. According to Buffalo Trace archivist Nick Laraquente, the legislation would never have happened without Taylor's tireless lobbying. Innovation drive was motivated by a desire to fix big problems in the industry of the time, he notes. From rectifiers that cut corners and produce horrible product, to distillery floors that smelled rancid, because the distiller's beer seeped into the floor. Luckily, a poor Taylor small batch enjoys placement at the other end of the spectrum. It is full of freshness, namely that of fruit, cloves and caramel corn. It's like a Kentucky County Fair in a jar. Being an ID-carrying colonel myself, I find this particularly poignant. And while Taylor remains the #1 name in bib whiskey, it's not the only one. In fact, after years of fading into relative curiosity, we are currently blessed with a true renaissance of the subcategory.